This first session today is called Band Language, Not Bad Language. Um, and we're talking about how to communicate to your rhythm section and to your band. Um, it's If you have an orchestra, you have a choir, talking to your band guys is like can feel like speaking a different language. It's amazing the difference and different terminologies we use, things that I would never say necessarily to an orchestra, or words I would never use with an orchestra. Um, I find myself using all the time when I'm talking to the rhythm section. So, a little backstory: I'm the worship pastor at First Baptist Church Woodstock. Also do quite a bit of arranging and orchestrating for various publishers, artist projects. And so I write a ton of rhythm charts, and I work with a ton of rhythm sections, both at my church and also at in studio sessions. But honestly, the vocabulary is the same on a professional and a non-professional level. For me, I try to keep all those terminologies pretty similar. So, um, again, if you're just checking in with us, you can see the handout in the chat room. And so go ahead and open that up. And throughout the session, if a question comes up, especially in regards to something we're talking about, go ahead and drop that into the chat room. Since I'm not, there is a Q&A tab, but let's just stay in the chat room, and I'll be sure to address those questions as I see them pop up, or at least by the end. So we'll save some time towards the end as well. Let me pray for us and we'll jump in. Lord, we're so thankful for this morning. What a gift technology is to allow us to um, have this time together, even though we're spread out all over the country. So thank you for Baylor and their creativity and still making this wonderful conference a reality. I pray you'll bless our time today, and I pray that it'll be encouraging to those listening, and we'll all grow in our area and grow together as we talk and discuss. We pray these things in your name. Amen. All righty. So mainly in this session, what we're going to do is walk through a lot of just vocabulary, which is more exciting than it sounds. A lot of times when I, um, you know, uh, see the word vocabulary, that's not necessarily exciting. But this is going to be more exciting than a typical vocabulary test or anything like that. The biggest thing when we're working with a band is for everybody um, to know what you're talking about when you're looking at a chart. So, in sessions down the road, today and tomorrow, we're going to talk about chart formats and what kinds of charts are offered, what kind, even that I prefer, and why. But no matter if you're looking at a very detailed rhythm chart that has measure numbers on it, or if you're just looking at a like a lyric sheet with chords, knowing the sections of the song and having those clearly identified are super helpful for your band. They're helpful in rehearsal to know uh, what section you're talking about when you're talking about a section. And so if you're the chart creator, no matter how detailed or undetailed your charts are, clearly mark the sections of the song. So I'm going to walk through several of those, and then all of these terms are not necessarily a part of every song, but they are a part of many songs. So super quick, the intro is the beginning of a song. And one thing to note, and a lot of times people will use the term intro, like later on in the song because it's the same content. I really think that's a little confusing. John, I see your chat there. That's pretty funny. All good, man. I have 4 kids too. I forgot to mention that. I'm married to my wife, April. We have 4 children, so I've had kids type random letters on my computer before too. That's so great. I love it. I'm glad they're involved in this breakout too. But I like to use the word intro to literally justify the beginning of a song, even if the material comes back, like even if it's the same motif as it is, later on, we're going to use it in a different setting. The intro is what happens at the beginning of a song. I think if that term is used later in the song, it can be confusing. So we'll get to some other terms in just a minute for that. The verse, that's pretty self-explanatory. Pre-chorus or a pre, a lot of songs have this section that happens between the verse and the chorus. And so the term pre, or really that's just short for pre-chorus, is just usually a section that helps build or connect the verse to the chorus. Your chorus, obviously pretty self-explanatory there. The turn, or I should have also put turnaround. A traditional term for that would be interlude. That is the section that connects usually after the chorus, and it connects you back to a verse or connects you to the bridge of a song. So when I say turn, and a lot of times that intro information, the contents of the intro, especially in modern worship, most likely that is what is being played in the turn as well. Not all the time, but very, very often you'll see that same information, or maybe a bigger version of what was played in the intro. So just know that that turn may sound familiar, but calling it a turn is super helpful as opposed to saying intro, because an intro introduces the song. Okay, and then your bridge. This is essentially a song section of a song that's not the verse or chorus. Those tend to fall after the second chorus. Like, let's say you have verse, chorus, verse, chorus. If there's another section added after that, that is the bridge of the song. Every song doesn't have them, or even seeing, more songs now that have just more verses, maybe instead of a bridge, there's just a third verse. The song Living Hope would be like that. It's the most popular one I can think of. There's no bridge section. There's only verses and choruses in that. But the verse, then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. That, is a verse, but it comes all the way down and builds back up and is kind of used in that bridge slot. But just know every song may not have one, but if it's new content that is not the verse or chorus, that is the bridge of the song. A tag is going to be a repeated phrase, typically after the last chorus. I just mentioned Living Hope. That would be a similar situation there, where that song says, freedom in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. And it says that again, Jesus Christ, my living hope, and ends with, God, you are my living hope. That would be the tag of the song. So if your band is playing, we're on the last chorus. If you're talking through them through the rehearsal, or even in a live performance, you'll say, this would be, don't forget the tag. This is the tag coming up, but that is what that term means. And then the outro, again, very high chance that that is the same content as the intro or the turn. Not necessarily, and not every song has one too. So, uh, Living Hope, again, we'll use that example, ends on the word my living hope. So there's no outro. That's the end of the song right there. So not every song will have an outro, but that gives you the basic sections of a song. Any questions on that about the format of a song? Feel free to drop those in the chat room. But if not, we will keep going. BPM simply means the beats per minute, the speed of a song. So at the top of every rhythm chart I write, sometimes it may have a description. It may say, ballad or rock groove or epic approach, something like that, worship anthem. But next to that description of the song, I'm always going to have a quarter note equals whatever, 75, and that just makes sure that everybody's on the same page for the tempo of the song. So, pretty self-explanatory right there. That's super helpful for your electric guitar player if they have any effects or verb. Knowing the tempo of the song makes that sound good, and in the right pattern that it needs to be in. So that information may seem non-essential for everyone, but it really, really is helpful. So don't forget to drop that in. In 6/8, you'll see several different versions of a BPM. A lot of times it'll be dotted quarter equal. Typically say eighth note equals, and then it's usually a number in the 100s because it's happening more often. But that's just, and there's no necessarily a rhyme or reason for that. There's some like metronome and click reasons why I would say eighth notes, and mainly that's so if I'm playing with a click, I want to hear an eighth note click and not just the dotted quarter note because it's hard to stay accurate. And we'll talk more about that in sessions later on if you're able to attend. But that is what BPM means. So MD is your musical director. So, even some of your job titles might be music director. This term, in the context of a band, basically means you're band leader. It could just say band leader, but it's always, for whatever reason, it's always called an MD. Professional bands, every artist that you go see on tour or at a worship conference, every band you see on stage is going to have a leader, and that's called the MD, the musical director. Um, so even though these are very typical in professional settings, they're very helpful in church settings. Lots of MDs in church settings are not, church employees. They're volunteers, but they are the band leader. That is the person who can help keep the rehearsal on track. They're the person that all questions are designated towards, and they are the leader. They're driving everything. If you are set up in with ear monitors, and we'll talk a lot about that later in another session. But if you're set up on inner ears, the MD usually has a mic that just you can hear, and it helps communicate. Even in the middle of a service, you can communicate if there are changes, or if there's something, challenging on a chart that may come up, and he or she may mention, hey, don't forget this section's different, or hey, don't forget this chord is different than it is in the other choruses of a song, or hey, don't forget the tag. Don't forget, we're suddenly all out right here. Lots of things like that. Um, so that MD role is super, super helpful. I'm the worship pastor. I'm leading worship, and I have a separate person serving as the MD in our band at First Woodstock. So I can focus on leading worship, and they can focus on leading a band. So that role is super important. If that's not a role you have, I highly, highly recommend it. Click. We talked about this a little bit just a minute ago, but that's the steady beat of a song provided by a reliable source. Basically, and a metronome. Okay, great question from James. How do you relate to your MD as the leader? So, in our rehearsal, James, I'm talking to um, the MD. My mic obviously is in his ears as well. So, and I can hear him um, as the worship leader. All of our worship team, vocalist and band members, can hear our MD. And so I don't talk to him once the service starts because my mic is also on in the house, but his mic is never on in the house. It is only communicating. In our situation, he's communicating to our band, worship team, and even our orchestra. They're playing with ears on. He can also communicate to our sound team. So he really has access to lots of different lots of different folks. And then yeah, your next question's great. Do you let them know your plan beforehand and then they run it? Yeah. So he and I are on the same page. Mine happens to be on staff. It's Trey Tanner, our orchestra director. And so, before we leave the office for the week, we're going to talk about, hey, here's how sound check's going to flow on Sunday morning. Here are the songs we want to make sure we, start with to be sure we get through everything. And so, yeah, I'll dictate a plan and then he'll execute that plan over the course of the morning. So basically, the MD, a really great MD will know how to read your mind in the middle of a worship service. So we do have a few. I try to not do like a bunch of hand signals or anything during a worship set, but uh, here's an example: the invitation for us. You know, sometimes we need more content than we have scheduled. We need to play a longer version of the song we're doing, or sometimes we have another service a few minutes after our service, and so we've got to transition the room. We got to get people out, get people in, and so Trey and I know we've got a couple of different, like I turn around and look at him if we need to end the song at the end of the next section. And he knows what that means without me, even doing any kind of hand signal or going like this or anything. If I turn around and look at him, that means we're done. So he will then say to the band, hey, band, we're going to, everybody, start getting softer, or we're going to slow down here at the end of this chorus of I surrender all. And so sometimes we stop, not abruptly, but not in an expected spot. It might be that this is the part of the song that's supposed to build into the bridge, and Trey will say, hey guys, change of plans, we're going to end right here. So don't build, instead get softer, and we'll fade out at measure. We always talk in measure numbers to everybody because our charts have measure numbers on them. So he'll say, we're going to end at measure 50. So go ahead and fade out towards bar 50. So yeah, those are the kinds of communications we'll have once the service is started. In the sound check, yeah, we're talking almost constantly, and I'll address the whole band, but sometimes they can all hear me, but usually my comments are directed towards the band director who enforces that with everybody else. So that's kind of how that relationship works for us. Good question. Any other questions on that? Okay. Hey, moving right along. Um, so we're talking about the click. That's the steady beat. We'll talk about playing with click versus not playing with click in another session. Um, but I'm a big fan of it. I'll just say that right now. But playing with a click is basically saying like playing with a metronome. So the word click is that. Pocket. This is a super, super common word in band vocabulary. Here are a few just descriptors that are hopefully helpful. Basically, it's the art of playing accurately with the click. So if someone plays well with a click, then they have a good pocket. If someone tends to rush ahead or drag behind, then they do not have a good pocket. But the good news is that anybody can improve in this area. So it's not that you would ever say in the middle, especially in a ministry context, you would never say, "Hey, I don't think you have a good pocket." But I will definitely use the phrase, "Hey guys, as a band, our pocket's not really good in this section. Can we tighten that up a little bit?" Um, so anyway, just know that you want to be obviously careful how you would voice that. Maybe that's a one-on-one conversation. Hey, I notice you uh, tend to rush. You may want to try having a little more click in your ear monitor, or practice with a metronome at home so you can improve your pocket. So that's ways that I would use that term. But you'll hear that one pretty often, especially in session worlds and studios and rhythm sessions, but also more and more in a worship band context. Um, Groove, this term is most helpful for the drummer, but everyone should play a little more if the chart says groove. So, once the whole band is in, everybody's playing. That means that we're all grooving. And Otherwise, at the beginning of a song, maybe it's just piano, maybe it's just guitar. But once the band is all playing and all playing the same pattern, that's what I would use the word groove to describe. A diamond, if you're looking at a rhythm chart from a choral publisher, a diamond usually is where, instead of slashes on a chart, it's a notation. But the notes are shaped like a diamond, so it's not like real quarter notes or half notes. They all have a diamond head to them, and basically that means, let's say I'm a guitar player. I'm reading every measure has slashes on it, but then I'm coming up on one measure that just has a whole note notation and it's a diamond. That just means I'm playing the downbeat, I'm playing when the chord changes, and I'm just letting it ring. So unless it's notated to be short, with a rooftop accent or something like that, I'm just letting the chord ring over until the next diamond occurs or until the next chord change occurs. So diamond is probably the most, I would never use the word, "Hey, let's play diamonds here," to an orchestra. I mean, they're reading notes on a page. I would never use the word groove with an orchestra. I might use the word pocket, especially if they're rushing, or behind, like, "Hey, our pocket's not together. We need to really pay attention to the conductor," or have more click in our ear, whatever the case may be, whatever the setup may be. Um, so that's what the term diamond means, and helps the song breathe. A lot of times they're used for like moments in a song. It'll be a big diamond. Maybe it's just a vocal feature while the band just holds. All different kinds of ways those can be used. So it's not necessarily in a softer only section. It could definitely be um, used in a bigger, more epic part of the song as well. All right, time's flying here. Goodness gracious. Okay. All right, building. That seems pretty self-explanatory. Adding, adding more tone. That's a little typo there. Instead of added, adding more and more tone or busyness to your part leading up to the next section of a song. Um, a lot of a lot of choruses, a lot of bridges, have building sections, and that a lot of times in worship songs means like an eighth note build or a 16th build, and that means everybody's doing that. So everybody's, building at the same rate. Sometimes it may mean that we're coming out of a section of a song that maybe just starts with just keys or just guitar, and then it may say, band building. That means slowly and subtly we're all, building back in, not just right out of the gate, playing, but easing into a song, not playing a ton of notes initially, and by the time the next section begins, where we're all grooving again. So that's typically what that means. Um, a push is a note played before a downbeat. So on a chart, you would get a rhythm chart from a choral publisher. That's going to be notated with notation. So let's say the chord is played on the and of four instead of the downbeat of one. A chart from a publisher will be slash slash slash, and then it may have a eighth rest and then an eighth note with the chord above it. So, you're playing 1, 2, 3, dun, dun. So that's the idea. A push chord means it's going to be before. So think pushing ahead, and that's super super common in band language. So pushing a chord means before the downbeat, but hopefully that's notated well on your rhythm chart. The motif, a lot of times that's just a common, a lot of times you'll hear the motif of a song in the intro, turns, and outros. Um, some songs have them, some songs don't, but you do hear a lot that have this common theme that's not the melody. It's like its own secondary melody that maybe is never sung, but it's just played by a lead instrument. So we'll use often the term motif for that. And then let's get into a few just specific instrumental terms. So looking at common drum terms there, again, the word groove. If that is in the context of your drummer, like if you're saying drums groove here, that typically means like a pretty basic straight ahead groove, often with the kick and the snare, being the main players in that. Probably a hi-hat or ride cymbal, but um, the kick and snare will rule the day in that scenario. A tom groove, that's not a person's name, it's actually a thing, right? So tom groove means the toms are the main player in a groove. You'll hear tons of tom grooves and tons of worship songs. So very, very common there. Still, along with the click, it's rare that you would just have your toms being played without the kick involved at some point, at least on the big beat. So again, I feel like I'm being super vague, but depending on what the song is, that could feel a lot of different ways, and depending on your BPM, depending on the time signature. So lots of ways that could be played out. A snare time groove means that you guessed it, both are going to be involved. So a lot of times that might mean, tom, 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 snare, tom, 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 snare. So it means that, and they might be more interwoven than that, but something like that might be what a snare tom groove would be. Um, all right, a tight groove. That means I'm looking for less sound from the drum kit. So maybe you've been playing and your hi-hat is open, like their foot is not down on the hi-hat, and you're just hearing lots of jingling going on over there, or they're playing the ride cymbal, which obviously rings every time you hit it during the bigger section of a song. So to play a tight groove means, that hi hat's going to be closed, and nothing else that's being played is really busy necessarily. So that's what a tight groove means. Four on the floor. This one's super common. That means your kick is playing on every beat. And it may mean that nothing else is going on. If it just says four on the floor groove, it could be that it's just the kick, or you might have your hi hat going, but that it does the main thing that dictates to the drummer is that they're playing every downbeat with the kick drum. So that's super helpful. Fills are not always notated. I try to notate them when like it's a must-have for the chart. But the main thing drummers need to know about fills is to not do them too much. If they're filling in the middle of sections of a song, they may be filling too much, and that's a tendency, especially for the less inexperienced drummer. Their tendency is going to be to overplay, and so you may want to say, "Hey, fill less," or make sure you don't fill until you're going into the section of a song. But the word you would use there would be fill. Um, Push the kick. This means similar to the way we used the word push earlier. Pushing the kick means it's going to come before the downbeat. So you can probably hear my foot. So if that's our tempo, then your kick might be one, and then one. So all that means. So you might be describing a groove to your drummer, and instead of it just being one, dun, and then one snare, kick, snare, it might be kick, kick, snare, kick, snare. So just know that can help your drummer, and help you communicate with them a little better. Um, Okay, moving on to some other instruments. Common acoustic guitar terms. These are super basic, but picking or finger picking, that just means playing in a more arpeggiated way as opposed to strumming. And so, depending on what the song is, it's just sometimes easier to dictate that so they don't have to guess. And both are common, and both are common in worship music. So it's easier for them not to assume and to know what you're wanting there. So just to notate it is super helpful. And then obviously strumming just means strumming. So not picking and strumming. Some common electric terms, layers, adding more tone to a section. So let's say I'm in the first verse of a song, and it just has keys playing. Halfway through that first verse, I might say, electric, add some layers here. Now, that doesn't mean they're adding like some crazy aggressive tone, but it means they're helping fill the space. That's also a common term for like keys players if they're playing pads, on a synth kind of sound. I might say, hey, let's add some layers here, and that just means to help kind of fill some of the space and start to fill out the sound a little more. For electric players, drive or overdrive. You could say even distortion or more tone, but that means they ought to be getting a little more angry with their tone. It ought to have be a little more aggressive. And this final term, this one is so important for your band as a whole. That's why I saved it to the end. Less is more. I say this so often, and it's such a common term. If you listen um, to records, listen to albums, listen to great bands, great artists, you'll notice a lot of times the what the band is doing really isn't um, elaborate or crazy. It's less is more, but it honors the song. It's just right for the song, and that's really, again, I'm speaking in general terms because it could depend on what the song is. If you're playing a driving, high energy worship song, then less is more may not apply. You want it to be busy. You want everybody to be playing, a lot of notes, but even in songs like that, sometimes less is more still applies. Again, the tendency, the more inexperienced a band member is, the more busy they're going to play. And it seems like it wouldn't be that way, but it's just a common trend. So just know it's a helpful thing to say, hey, less is more. Um, don't forget, hey, in this section right here, guys, less is more. It may be that you want them playing diamonds. Again, that would be another time to say, hey, less is more right here. Don't only play when the chords change. And that can be super, super helpful information for your team. So, um, hey, we just got a few minutes left here. Any questions about anything we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about? I'd love to make sure we have time to jump into those before our time is up today. So I'll give you a second if you have anything you want to add to the chat room. Okay, I guess that means I covered every definition you need to work with your band. I hope that's the case. I really try to be pretty thorough here. Just so you know, in case you don't have your schedule in front of you, I'll be back for a few more sessions, and those are listed for you if you've done the tutorial for the how all this is set up. So, teaching your worship band a song, the balance between reading a chart and listening to a demo. We'll dig into that. It's going to be really good. Another session will be the worship band sound check and why it is so important. That's a big one, and just talking about preparing the way for your worship service and some key practices for how to do that. And then finally, discipling your worship band and what our role is in that, and how our band, their worship leaders as well. We got a question from John here. My church is primarily set up for piano and organ. What are some foundational things you suggest to prepare for band worship in the future? That's a great question, John. I would recommend um, uh, adding drums and bass. So as you're adding a band, if you're not adding things all at once, I would make sure, like, I wouldn't add guitar before I have bass and drums. Those are kind of the foundations of your rhythm section. So start there, and then adding guitars becomes easier, and it sounds better once you have drums and bass in the mix. So those are really important. Obviously, your organist, navigating what they're doing foot pedal wise versus what a bass player would do. Those will be things to navigate musically, and that'll change from song to song. If it's a really driving song, you might have your organist not play pedals, but have your bass player do the driving there. But that can change on a big ballad where things are big and open. So the other aspects would be, um, uh, how they're monitored, and we'll talk about that in some other sessions. What monitoring looks like, and so there may be some purchases you'd want to make before you add the band, and that's just to help, add them well, not have to add a ton of speakers on your stage for everybody to hear. And then as far as drums, placement for drums is really important, especially if you haven't or not currently using those in your worship center. Maybe having a drum shield, possibly even using electric drums. It is amazing how far electric drums have come. Roland has a brand called V Drums, and they continue to make great improvements that sound real, they sound acoustic, but you can control the volume of them. So, depending on the size of your sanctuary, that can be a huge, huge factor. Those would be a few suggestions, both on the tech side and the instrumental side. How do you direct a less experienced player into less is more? Great question, James. Here's some things I would say, especially let's say they're less experienced and their patterns. Maybe if they're a guitar player or a keyboard player, and the busyness is not in the pocket. They don't have a good pocket yet. They haven't played with click enough. Then you would say, hey, less is more. Just play when the chords change. A common theme, because of how written piano music is, piano parts, if you buy a choral anthem or even a praise chart, the piano parts, it's not exactly what the pianist on the album is playing. In the left hand, that's written for, the pianist to play if there's not a bass player. And so if you're playing with a bass player to your pianist, you might say, hey, less is more right here. So in the right hand, instead of playing what's written, only play, or the left hand, only play in your left hand when the chords change, instead of playing the pattern that's written. Because if you have your pianist and a bass player both playing the same pattern, it's going to be really muddy. It's unlikely it's going to be really together. And so that would be one thought. And for a pianist who's come from a setting where they're just playing by themselves and then they are, added into a band scenario, that's one of the first things that needs to change, to help them adapt to playing with a band. So, great question there. We just hit the zero, everybody. So, you've got my email address on this chat room, cliff.duren@fbcw.net. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to shoot those my way. And I hope to see you guys pop up on some of our future sessions over the next 2 days. If not, thanks so much for tuning in. And I hope this was helpful information for you. God bless you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.